Looking for magic cards? At flipsidegaming.com you can now use the promo code LVD to get a 10% discount on orders over $10 while supporting the channel at the same time. Hello and welcome to another episode of Wacky Wednesday, a weekly series where we explore wacky deck ideas in both Standard and Modern, and this week we're taking a look at a Standard deck built around Journey to Eternity, a 3-mana legendary enchantment aura that has to enchant one of our creatures, and then when the enchanted creature dies, we get to return it from our graveyard to the battlefield right away, and we also get to transform Journey to Eternity into Cave of Eternity, which is a legendary land that lets us return creatures from our graveyard to the battlefield by tapping the cave and paying 5 mana. So a very powerful effect that can win a lot of grindy games. So let's take a look at the rest of the deck, starting out with our 2-drops, where we have 4 copies of Dusk, a Legion Zealot, a 2-mana 1/1 that lets us draw a card at the cost of 1 life, so helps us dig for the Journey to Eternity, also makes for a great target to enchant with the Journey to Eternity, as when he dies we will get to draw another card, and of course once in the graveyard and we have a transformed Journey to Eternity, getting him back from the graveyard is also very valuable, so just a great card all around in the deck. Next up we have 4 copies of Kitesail Freebooter, a 2-mana 1/2 flyer that when she enters the battlefield we can look at the opponent's hand and then take a non-creature non-land card and exile it until the Kitesail Freebooter leaves the battlefield, so it gives us some disruption against the more controlling decks, maybe take away a removal spell. Then we have 4 copies of Channeler Initiate, a 2-mana 3/4 that when she enters the battlefield we have to put 3 -1/-1 counters on one of our creatures, and then we can also tap the Channeler Initiate, remove a -1/-1 counter from her, and then add 1 mana of any color to her mana pool. So usually you play the Initiate, put the 3 -1/-1 counters on herself, that way you have access to a 2-mana mana creature that you can activate 3 times before you're left with a 2-mana 3/4, which is quite powerful. But in this deck you can also use those -1/-1 counters to your advantage with a Journey to Eternity. Let's say you play a turn 2 Dusk Legion Zealot, on turn 3 you enchant it with Journey to Eternity, and then on turn 4 you can play Channeler Initiate and put those -1/-1 counters on your Dusk Legion Zealot. That way the Dusk Legion Zealot dies and you get to transform your Journey to Eternity into Cave of Eternity, so that's also a neat synergy in our deck. Next up we have 4 copies of Jadelight Ranger as just a solid role player in our deck, 3-mana 2/1 that double explores when she enters the battlefield, so exploring means we get to take a look at the top card of our library. If it's a land we get to draw it, if it's a non-land card we can decide whether or not to put it in our graveyard or keep it on top of our deck, and then we also get to put a +1/+1 counter on the Jadelight Ranger, so a very powerful effect that synergizes nicely in our deck, since putting creatures in a graveyard is nice for a transformed Journey to Eternity, but also just getting a Jadelight Ranger back with Journey to Eternity means we get those 2 explore triggers once again, which means more card advantage and more selection. Next up we have 4 copies of Thrashing Brontodon, which you typically see in sideboards, but here we're playing 4 copies main deck, a 3-mana 3/4 that we can sacrifice to destroy an artifact or enchantment. So Thrashing Brontodon obviously shines against decks with lots of artifacts or enchantments, as you can destroy those and then maybe even enchant the Brontodon with a Journey to Eternity before sacrificing him to keep destroying those artifacts or enchantments. But the Brontodon also works nicely with Journey to Eternity without needing a target from the opponent. So what you can do is on turn 3 play out your Thrashing Brontodon, and then on turn 4 play out Journey to Eternity enchanting the Brontodon, and then use your spare mana to sacrifice a Brontodon, targeting your own Journey to Eternity. And then what happens is, since sacrificing the Brontodon is part of the cost, the Journey to Eternity will transform before it's destroyed by the Brontodon's ability, leaving you with a transformed Journey to Eternity, and your Thrashing Brontodon will return from your graveyard to the battlefield, so it's almost like he never left. Then of course we have our 4 copies of Journey to Eternity, and as you've noticed most creatures in our deck have Enter the Battlefield abilities to fully take advantage of them coming back from the graveyard into play. Next up we have 2 copies of Gonti, Lord of Luxury, a 4-mana 2/3 with Death Touch. When he enters the battlefield we can take a look at the top 4 cards of the opponent's library, exile one of them, and we can cast the exiled card at any point, and we don't need to worry about having the right colors of mana to cast the exiled card. So a nice 2-for-1 that also combines nicely with Journey to Eternity. Next up we have 4 copies of a Ravenous Chupacabra, which is our main removal spell in the deck, a 4-mana 2/2 creature that when he enters the battlefield we can destroy one of the opponent's creatures, so a nice creature to get back with the Journey to Eternity as well if we're facing a creature deck. Then we have 2 copies of Vizier of the Menagerie, a 4-mana 3/4 that lets us take a look at the top card of our library, and we can cast the top card of our library as long as it's a creature card. And the Vizier also fixes our mana when it comes to casting creature spells. So the Vizier is great in our deck since half the cards in our deck are creature cards, so it's gonna provide a lot of card advantage. Also synergizes nicely with cards like Jadelight Ranger. If there's a land on top, we can maybe cast a Jadelight Ranger to get another shot at finding a creature on top of our deck. And also synergizes nicely with our next card, which is a Liliana, Death's Majesty, 5 mana Planeswalker. Her +1 ability lets us make a zombie token, and also mills the top 2 cards of our library into our graveyard, which is nice to keep fueling our Journey to Eternity, but also works nicely with Vizier, since if there's a land on top, we can mill it away with Liliana and have another shot at finding a creature on top of our deck. Her minus ability returns a creature from our graveyard to the battlefield and turns it into a black zombie as well, which goes nicely with the -7, which destroys all non-zombie creatures, so that way we don't lose the creatures we've returned with the minus ability, and of course the zombie tokens also stay alive. And last but not least, we have 2 copies of Verdurous Gearhulk, a 5 mana 4/4 with Trample. When he enters the battlefield, we get to distribute 4 +1/+1 counters among creatures we control, so can add a lot of power and toughness to the board, and works nicely with Journey to Eternity as well. Then quickly going over the mana base, we have 4 copies of Blooming Marsh, which enters battlefield untapped if it's one of our first 3 lands. We have 4 copies of Foul Orchard as a necessary evil, which enters the battlefield tapped. Then we have a lot of basics, 9 forests, 5 swamps, and also 2 copies of Ifnir Deadlands, which we can use in the late game to put 2 -1/-1 counters on one of the opponent's creatures. So that's the main deck. Now let's quickly go over the sideboard, where we have 3 copies of Duress against combo and control decks, 2 copies of Arguel's Bloodfast, which is another enchantment that transforms into a land, and the front side is great against control decks, as we can draw a lot of extra cards with it. And once the Bloodfast transforms, we get access to a legendary land that also functions as a sacrifice outlet, which is great in combination with the Journey to Eternity, as we can sacrifice our creatures and then get them back with the Cave to Eternity. Then we have 2 copies of Deathgorge Scavenger, which can function as graveyard hate, can gain some life back against the aggressive matchups. Then we have 2 copies of Banewhip Punisher, which can come in against the more aggressive decks, putting a -1/-1 counter on a creature when she enters the battlefield, and we can sacrifice the Punisher to destroy target creature with a -1/-1 counter on it, so it can even take out larger creatures. And the Punisher also works great with Journey to Eternity. We can maybe put the -1/-1 counter on a Dusk Legion Zealot that's enchanted by Journey to Eternity, or we can simply enchant the Banewhip Punisher with the Journey, and then sacrifice the Banewhip Punisher to transform the Journey to Eternity. So there's lots of synergies there. We also have 1 copy of Dreamstealer as an additional threat against control decks, making them discard a card whenever he deals combat damage to them, and we can also eternalize it for 6 mana. Then we have 2 copies of Arborback Stomper as a 5 mana 5/4 with Trample that gains 5 life when he enters the battlefield, so great against the more aggressive decks. Then we have 1 copy of Demon of Dark Schemes as a 6 mana 5/5 with Flying that gives -2/-2 to all creatures when he enters the battlefield, so great against token decks. And then last but not least, 2 copies of Carnage Tyrant, which is great against the blue-black control decks as an uncounterable threat with hexproof. So that's the deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, we're on the draw, and we're missing black mana, and our hand is pretty stacked with 3-drops, but I think we can actually keep, just because we have Ranger to help us find lands, and then we have the Brontodon plus Journey combo. Opponent with a tapped Sheltered Thicket. We draw Foul Orchard, perfect. Another Thicket. And no play from the opponent. A 3rd Journey, alright. Rootbound Crag into. Nothing, alright. Opponent off to a slow start. We could play the Jadelight Ranger, but it's likely to die, so I'd rather play out the Brontodon here, which is more likely to survive a 3 damage burn spell. And then next turn we can already transform the Journey. And Ribjaw Raptor, that's fine. A Ravenous Chupacabra is excellent. Once we transform the Journey, we'll have access to a land that can produce black mana as well to cast the Chupacabra. Think the plays, play the Journey on the Brontodon, and then just say go. And then we can block with the Brontodon on the Raptor, and then sacrifice it before damage. That way the opponent doesn't get to draw a card from Enrage, and we get to transform the Journey. Opponent with their own Brontodon doesn't really change anything, since we can sacrifice our Brontodon at any point to transform the Journey. Alright, they're just gonna force us to do this right now. Transform the journey, and we'll have to take 4 from the Raptor if we don't want the opponent to draw a card. So we'll take 4. And Foul Orchard to draw. So we can just play Chupacabra, kill the Ripjaw Raptor, that seems okay. Could also go with Jadelight Ranger plus Initiate. Think I just like the Chupacabra here, since next turn we can play the Initiate, killing our own Chupacabra, and then we can get it back later. And I'll get in for 3 here. No play from the opponent, we draw Gonti. So 6 mana at our disposal. Think we start by getting in for 5. That works, and think I'll run out the Jadelight Ranger. Find a land and the Gonti. We'll keep the Gonti. I guess we can put it in the graveyard since we have one in hand, and that way we have more fuel for the Cave of Eternity. Play the land. And I guess we snag this Drover of the Mighty. And say go. Deathgorge Scavenger can eat the Gonti that's in our graveyard, so that's annoying. But at least we didn't play the Initiate, killing our own Chupacabra. And this looks like a Savage Stomp, perhaps. Yep, Savage Stomp on Chupacabra, that actually works out perfectly, since now we can just get the Chupacabra back with the cave. And attack for a bunch. And there we go. Alright, so up against the red-green dinosaurs, how do we want to sideboard? Don't think we need to change much, to be honest. Banewhip Punisher could be okay, just as additional creature removal. And I suppose... let's see, Kitesail Freebooter is probably not going to be at her best. So I could see taking out 2 copies of Kitesail Freebooter for 2 Punishers. And other than that, could consider the Arborback Stomper for some more power and toughness, or the Carnage Tyrant. I guess we'll cut all the Freebooters since we're not too concerned about our opponent having lightning strikes. And then I guess I'll go with 1 Carnage Tyrant and 1 Arborback Stomper, just because I'm not sure which one is better. And yeah, let's try this. Alright, so we're on the draw here, and this hand looks pretty good. We've got lots of 2s, and then Journey and our Brontodon, so almost perfect hand here. Against the dinosaur deck, we would like a card like Ravenous Chupacabra or Banewhip Punisher, but this should get things started nicely. Let's lead with Blooming Marsh. And turn 2 we can just play the Zealot, and we could curve Zealot into Journey into Initiate. Opponent passes. Alright, another Blooming Marsh. Play the Zealot. And say go. And there's a Chupacabra, excellent. So if our opponent taps out, we're good to go on Journey to Eternity. If our opponent keeps up mana, we might have to do something else. Alright, Deathgorge Scavenger, that's fine. So we can play the Journey. If our opponent has a Brontodon, they can blow up the Journey, but it's not the end of the world. Could also go with our own Brontodon. That way we kind of can ensure that we can transform the Journey next turn like we did last game. I guess that's a bit safer here. So sure, let's play the Brontodon. And say go. And the Brontodon also blocks the Scavenger nicely, so that's a bonus point there. Although I guess if the opponent can't get rid of the Journey, we could have just blocked the Scavenger with the Zealot as well, which is also a nice way of transforming the Journey. Alright, Ripjaw Raptor, that's okay. No attacks. And I think we just try to transform the Journey right away here. I guess we can wait and try to block the Ripjaw Raptor once again. And even if the opponent has an instant speed naturalize effect, we can always sacrifice a Brontodon in response. 5 mana Register Alpha. Alright. So we might chump block with the Dusk Legion Zealot here. Just the Ripjaw Raptor attacking, so now we're just going to go with the block with the Brontodon play and then sacrifice the Journey. Alright, get to untap, another Chupacabra, that's nice. Probably just want to run out the Chupacabra here and kill the Register Alpha. And we can afford to take 4 from the Ripjaw Raptor. Just don't want the opponent to have hasty dinosaurs. A Braid on the Chupacabra, so the opponent could attack with the Scavenger and exile the Chupacabra here. But that means they might be giving up the Scavenger. So let's go to blocks. Block the Scavenger if they have a Blossoming Defense here. I guess that would be annoying, since then the Scavenger survives, and next turn they might be able to eat the Brontodon if we don't want to use the Chupacabra. And then the question here is, do we take 7 or do we chump with the Dusk Legion Zealot? Think we can afford to chump here, and then our opponent does get to draw an extra card, but we preserve our life total and we should have the late game covered here. Opponent did not have Blossoming Defense, so the Scavenger dies. And the follow-up, maybe a Brontodon. Yep, that's fine. Alright, we get to untap. Banewhip Punisher to draw. Pretty similar to Chupacabra in this spot. I think we just play the Chupacabra, destroying the Ripjaw Raptor, and then say go. Drover of the Mighty is fine. And no attacks. Another Journey to Eternity. I guess here we can just develop our mana, play a Jadelight Ranger. And Gonti is fine. I guess we should probably keep Gonti, but I kind of want to find lands as well. I guess by putting Gonti in the graveyard, we can get him back with the Cave of Eternity as well. So sure, let's put it in the graveyard, and then we drew the Swamp, which is nice. So now we can go Swamp. And I think the play is still to play out the Initiates here and put the -1/-1 counters on ourselves. And say go. And if we draw land next turn, we have enough mana to put the -1/-1 counters on the Chupacabra, and afterwards get back the Chupacabra with the Cave. Opponent gets another Ripjaw Raptor with the Commune. But looks like they're going for Burning Sun's Avatar instead. Alright. Let's see which creature they want to kill here. They kill the Jadelight Ranger. And a very aggressive attack. Opponent realizes that they're not going to win the late game, so they just have to go for it. We'll block the Trampling Dino, and then I think we just chump the Brontodon and then get back the Chupacabra to kill the Burning Sun's Avatar. Alright, Swamp. So we can play another Initiate and activate the Cave. Opponent still has a Ripjaw Raptor in hand. And here we have a few options. We can block the Brontodon with our Brontodon and the Initiate, and then use the Initiate for mana, getting back Chupacabra, killing the Burning Sun's Avatar. Or we can just get back the Chupacabra, kill the Burning Suns, and then put the Chupacabra in front of the Brontodon, so we have another activation, which is also reasonable. I think I like getting rid of the Brontodon here, so I'll block first, and then get back the Chupacabra. destroying the Burning Suns. And then we trade Initiate for Thrashing Brontodon. And the opponent's follow-up is Ixalan's Binding. Alright, that's fine. Gets rid of the Ravenous Chupacabra, but we can just destroy the Ixalan's Binding with the Brontodon if we want to. And there's a Ripjaw Raptor. Alright, that worked out fine. And yeah, can just destroy the Ixalan's Binding, get the Chupacabra back, kill the Raptor. So our opponent probably didn't think this one through. Let's just do that now. And then we can even play the Punisher to put a -1/-1 counter on the Drover, but I would rather get back a Gonti, I think. I suppose we can get Gonti back now, in case we find a 2-drop we want to play from the opponent. And yep, there's a Drover of the Mighty, which I don't mind getting back here. We have a Brontodon in hand to give it +2/+2. Huatli, alright. Can kill some of our creatures or can make a dino. They're gonna make a dino. So here, let's see, what can we get back in our graveyard? Can just get back a Dusk Legion Zealot. Can play the Punisher, get rid of the dinosaur, and then kill Huatli. Let's see, we have enough mana to play the Punisher, put a counter on the dinosaur, then sacrifice the Punisher, and then get the Punisher back. And put a -1 counter on the Drover. That way we cut off our opponent's white mana as well. And attack Huatli for 3 and our opponent for 2. And we can always sacrifice the Punisher, destroying our own Initiate if we really want to get back the Punisher from the graveyard. And here's Carnage Tyrant. So that's gonna help us close out the game. So let's cast the Carnage Tyrant. That way we have a dino in play for the Drover. And then attack for a bunch. And we'll add a Brontodon as well. And that does it. Awesome. Managed to beat the red-green dinosaurs, which is probably a pretty great matchup, having access to Chupacabras and even Banewhip Punisher after sideboard. And then our Journey to Eternity just took over the game. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw, and this hand seems okay. We've got some acceleration or journey, and some value creatures. Opponent with Mountain Go. Let's lead with Tapped Foul Orchard. Turn to Makeshift Munitions. Alright, opponent trying to maybe steal our stuff and then sacrifice it. We're gonna run out the Initiates. Probably should have played the Blooming Marsh there. And there's PL's Revolution. So when a non-token artifact is put into their graveyard from the battlefield, they can return that card unless we decide to take 3 damage. Alright, I'm intrigued. So I think the safest play here is probably just to put the Journey to Eternity on our Channeler Initiate. Could also run out the Vizier, but then if they have maybe an Act of Treason effect and then kill our Vizier, that's kind of a disaster. So let's just put the Journey on our Channeler. And next turn we could even play a second Channeler to put more -1/-1 counters on the original one, so that it transforms. And even if the opponent steals the Initiate and sacrifices it, we would still be the ones with the transformed Journey to Eternity, since we control the aura, even if they steal our creature with an Act of Treason effect. Instead, Foundry Inspector, that's fine. Ornithopter. I see, so they can sacrifice the Ornithopter, and we have to take 4 damage essentially total, 1 from the munitions, 3 from the Chaos Revolution, otherwise they get the Ornithopter back. So we will take the 3 damage here, and the munitions targeting us. So let's untap. Ravenous Chupacabra is not bad here. We can run out another Initiate, targeting the original one, and then still have enough mana for a Vizier of the Menagerie. Or we can just Ravenous Chupacabra the Foundry Inspector. So that transforms. We get the Initiate back, put the -1/-1 counters on one of them. And then I think it's probably safer to just run out the Chupacabra, killing the Inspector. And then we'll take 3 from the Chaos Revolution and say go. And all of a sudden we have a 3/4 and a 2/2 that can start attacking. Next turn we can maybe play the Gearhulk or the Vizier. Key to the city, alright. And they're gonna sacrifice it with the makeshift munitions to kill the Channeler Initiate. That's okay. We'll take 3. Our opponent has 1 card left in hand. So what's the play here? We can get back the Channeler Initiate if we want to, put the counters on the Chupacabra so we have access to a way to destroy the opponent's creatures at instant speed. Could just try to go for the kill as quickly as possible with the Gearhulk, although we do have to be mindful of an Act of Treason effect on the way back. I think I still like just running out the Gearhulk here to try and close out the game as soon as possible. So let's do that. And then we can spread the counters out a little bit. Probably 2 and 2 on the Initiate and the Chupacabra. And then attack for 9. Opponent's at 11. And they're facing a lethal next turn. So they need something here. Implement of Combustion, sure. So they can sacrifice that. And they deal 1 damage to us, draw a card, and they have a trigger from the Chaos Revolution. I think we just take all the damage here. So we would take 4 down to 6. An Act of Treason effect is not enough to kill us. And that way your opponent doesn't get to keep drawing cards with the implement. So this Chaos Revolution did quite a bit of damage, but I think we're okay here. And alright, that does it. So up against a mono-red kind of combo deck, I think Arborback Stomper is probably a fine addition to gain some life back. Carnage Tyrant as an untargetable threat that can also close out the game quickly. I think I like the Freebooter. The Brontodon's gonna be great at killing those enchantments. Maybe we don't need Gonti in this matchup. Not sure we need the Vizier. Scavenger could also be okay, but it doesn't really interact favorably with the Chaos Revolution since we can't really exile anything at instant speed with the Scavenger. I think this is about it. Maybe you could also add the Dreamstealer to pressure our opponent's hand. If they're light on removal, that could be okay as well. And then maybe shave either a Freebooter or one of our more expensive cards, like a Liliana that could die to the Chaos Revolution. Yeah, this seems okay. Alright, this hand looks okay. Turn 2 Initiate, turn 3 Chupacabra. And there's Ravenous Intruder. Alright, so that can kill us out of nowhere, but hopefully we can deal with it with our Chupacabra. Opponent with Shock on the Initiate, so we won't be able to play Chupacabra next turn. Seeing the Ravenous Intruder, maybe we can reconsider some of the cards we took out. Although Gonti doesn't seem great against the opponent's deck since most of the opponent's cards don't really do much in our game plan. Like if we find a Ravenous Intruder with Gonti, it doesn't really do much for us. And a 4 mana 2/3 Death Touch isn't all that amazing. Intruder gets in for 1, we find another Initiate, which we might as well play here. And say go. Opponent's got Lightning Strike to take care of it, that's fine. Didn't really need it to curve out here. There's a Foundry Inspector. Now we have to decide if we want to kill that with the Chupacabra or the Intruder. Opponent's got 2 cards left in hand, so that's not too many. I think I'm gonna play it safe and kill the Intruder here, which could do a lot of damage out of nowhere. The Chupacabra just blocks the Inspector, which is nice. The Chupacabra doesn't necessarily block the Intruder all that well. I'm gonna go ahead and kill the Intruder here. Next turn we get to play Arborback Stomper. There's an Ornithopter. And looks like our opponent's casting something with Improvise. Sweatworks Brawler, 3/3 with Menace. That's fine. And there's Thrashing Brontodon, which can take care of any enchantment our opponent plays. So here, let's just jam this Arborback Stomper. Next turn we can also consider using the Ifnir Deadlands to maybe kill the Inspector. So we go up to 23. No attacks with the Chupacabra this turn. And there's makeshift munitions. If our opponent attacks with the Brawler, I will double block, even though the opponent could kill the Arborback Stomper with the munitions afterwards. Interesting. So now we could just block the Inspector with the Arborback Stomper. It's probably fine here. Alright, they're just gonna sacrifice the Ornithopter, that's also fine. Alright, what now? I guess we just play the Jadelight Ranger. See what we can find. And Journey to Eternity we'll keep on top. And then we can still play out the Thrashing Brontodon. And next turn transform the Journey, which is gonna be game over. Attack for 2. And if our opponent attacks with the Brawler, I think I'll take it, since I don't want to risk losing the Brontodon before we can play the Journey next turn. No attacks. And yep, now we can just play the Journey on the Brontodon. And we can just use the Brontodon to destroy the munitions and transform the Journey that way. And that does it. Awesome, on to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw, and this hand looks okay. Turn 2 Initiate, turn 3 Chupacabra or Journey. Not a bad start. Up against the Swamp. So we could be facing Fatal Pushes here. Black-White, so Vampires perhaps. Yep, Dusk Legion Zealot. Another Journey. Well, let's hope our Initiate survives. Opponent with a Radiant Destiny naming Vampire, so they can attack for 2, that's fine. And Blooming Marsh. So I think we actually just want to put the Journey on the Initiate. Could get punished if the opponent has an Ixalan's Binding or Cast Out to exile our creature rather than kill it. But otherwise it's a blocker that the opponent really can't get around unless they have flying creatures. And if they kill it with a normal removal spell, then it also transforms. The other option is just playing the Chupacabra, but the Zealot is not a big target. So yeah, let's just put a Journey on the Initiates and hope to dodge an exile effect. 4 mana. And a Call to the Feast, that's fine. And our opponent's just gonna attack into our Initiates. Alright, I'll block. And we get the Initiate right back. And we even ramped by transforming the Journey there. Gonti is not bad. So here we could just play a Chupacabra, which kills a Vampire token and maybe trades with one. Could play a Gonti, which just blocks a Vampire. Or we can play the Gearhulk, put some counters on the Initiate even. So a lot of options. I kind of like playing the Gonti here, just to see what's up, maybe find a 2-drop we can play. And even if our opponent plays another Anthem effect, the Gonti would still trade for a Vampire. And alright, we find a Champion of Dusk and an Aspirant. Champion of Dusk would just draw us a card and lose a life unless we have some Zealots in play. Kind of want to get the cheaper card here so that we don't get overwhelmed by these tokens. And then we can play it right now. Since we have plenty of expensive cards and we can use the Cave as a mana sink, so I'm not too concerned about the late game, just want to make sure we survive this initial assault. And if they do have an other Anthem effect, we can block with the Aspirant and the Initiate and then tap the Initiate to remove a -1 counter, so they can still take out a 3/3 together. Well, there's another Radiant Destiny. So here we're just gonna make some trades. Our opponent's creatures have Vigilance. Might not be able to use the Cave next turn if we don't find an untapped land, but we still have lots of other plays available, and that works. So we made some trades. And I think we'll just run out of Chupacabra now that we drew a second one. And take out one of those lifelinkers. Say go. Not gonna chump block yet, since next turn we could play another Chupacabra, maybe double block a 3/3, or just play a Giant Gearhulk. So no blocks. If we had an untapped land, you could make the argument for chumping so we can get back the Chupacabra next turn, but getting back Gonti kind of does the same as well. Opponent still has 4 cards in hand, but they only have the single white source, which might hold them back a bit. And another Call to the Feast, that's pretty good here. Adding 9 power of lifelinking vampires. Alright, I think we just have to hope our opponent doesn't have a removal spell for the Gearhulk and play that, and then we can spread some counters on the Chupacabra as well. So we can put 3 on the Chupacabra, 1 on the Gearhulk, that way we have 2 5/5s. That seems reasonable. Unclaimed territory, naming Vampire. If they just have 2 more Legion Lieutenants here, we could be dead. Instead a Cast Out to take out presumably the Gearhulk. Yep. So they can hit us for 9 and that's lethal as well. So kind of got rushed by the Vampire deck, didn't find our untapped lands for us to be able to actually use our Cave, and kind of got stuck with a bunch of expensive cards in hand. Let's see if we can improve. Finding a Brontodon would have also been nice to take out those Radiant Destinies. So we're definitely adding the Demon. And what else do we want? Carnage Tyrant could be okay as just a big blocker that they can't get rid of with an Ixalan's Binding or Cast Out, so that's also consideration. Banewhip Punisher could be okay at maybe killing a token if they don't have an Anthem effect yet, so that's also consideration. Don't think we want the Duress. What don't we want? Given that our opponent was relying on Call to the Feast and Radiant Destiny, or Kitesail Freebooter is probably good enough. I could see shaving some number of Viziers, which could be too slow, and Liliana as well. And then maybe even shave a Gearhulk, just because it's a pretty easy target for a Cast Out or Ixalan's Binding. And then we can keep the rest, bring in these 5, so we have some more removal, a Sweeper, and then some threats that are difficult to deal with to close out the game with. Seems okay. Would like to be on the play. And this hand seems pretty great. Turn 2 Zealots, turn 3 perhaps Journey. Turn 1 Aspirants. Let's see what we draw. A Brontodon, alright. So we could just play Brontodon next turn and then guaranteed transform the Journey. Would not like to see a Legion Lieutenant here, and there it is, since now the opponent gets to attack for 3. But we'll take it for now. And then hope that this Brontodon can block for a turn. Thopter Arrest, that's painful. So that gets rid of the Brontodon. And we take 5. So here we can play the Journey, Chum Block, or we can play the Jadelight Ranger. I think I like playing the Journey here, and then just hoping they don't have another removal spell, like Cast Out or Thopter Arrest. Could also just play the Jadelight Ranger and not gamble. I guess it's a bit safer to play the Ranger here. See if we can maybe find something to ensure that the Journey transforms, and this should be able to trade for the opponent's creatures at least. And Freebooter is pretty good here, since we can play that and the Journey in the same turn. Not going to attack with the Zealot, even though I'm probably not blocking with it, but you never know. Don't think the 1 damage is gonna matter. And there's a Radiant Destiny, naming Vampire. Don't think they'll be attacking with the Lieutenant. So we could just trade here, which I think we want to do. Since once that gains flying, it's gonna be a bigger problem. So now we get to play the Freebooter. See if they have more non-creature spells in hand. They do. They have a Call to the Feast, and then they have Sanctum Seeker and Dusk Legion Zealot left. So we can definitely beat those. And then I think we just run out the Journey to Eternity on the Dusk Legion Zealot. And then especially now after Sideboard, we have multiple ways of transforming the Zealot without relying on the opponent attacking into the Zealot. But they probably have to if they want to kill us. So now we're mostly looking for Chupacabras, maybe Thrashing Brontodons, and then we should be good to go. So the opponent's also missing double black, so they can't play the Sanctum Seeker yet. So we might just see the Dusk Legion Zealot here. Unfortunately, we can't target our own creatures with Ifnir Deadlands. It's just the opponent's creatures. Otherwise we could also use it to kill our own Dusk Legion Zealot. Instead another Radiant Destiny, the play, and I'll definitely be blocking if they attack with the Legion Lieutenant here. Alright. So we get to draw a card, lose a life, and transform Journey. And Gonti, Lord of Luxury is nice, so here we can go Gonti plus Jadelight Ranger. And I might as well attack for 2. I guess we want to play Gonti first, in case we find something we want to play in the spot. Alright, those are some exciting cards. Cast Out, Champion of Dusk, Profane Procession. We could even use the Profane Procession thanks to our transformed cave, which can make mana of any color, and I don't think they can beat their own Profane Procession unless they find something like a Cast Out. Call to the Feast would be okay, but not great, and Cast Out would also be okay at taking care of one of the enchantments. I think we just take the Profane Procession here. Sounds pretty sweet, and I think we just cast it right now. And then we have these 2 value engines that we can exploit. And I think we do attack for 2 here. So next turn we get to exile the Legion Lieutenant. And we should also have enough mana to play the Jadelight Ranger. There's a Zealot. And an Ifnir Deadlands, which they are 1 black mana short of activating, to maybe kill the Freebooter. And a Martyr of Dusk was a draw as well. Alright. No attacks from the Legion Lieutenants. So let's run out the Jadelight Ranger. Banewhip Punisher is okay. We can play that and activate Procession next turn. Although I guess we won't be able to use the activated ability from the Punisher. Still seems like a relevant enough card that we can keep it on top. And then play the land. Attack for 1 with the Freebooter, say go, keep up Profane Procession activation, which we can use at instant speed. And if the opponent wants to play Sanctum Seeker, for example, we might be able to exile that instead of the Lieutenant if it's more threatening. Yep, there it is. Yeah, I think we actually get rid of the Sanctum Seeker here. And our opponent scoops it up. Awesome. So their own Profane Procession turned against them. So how do we want to approach the third game? I liked most of our sideboard cards here. Could be that the Carnage Tyrant is too slow and our opponent can just go wide, but I don't really see a solution in the sideboard either. Duress could be okay, since they did have quite a few non-creature spells, but they could just have an all-creature draw as well. So I think we just run it back. Alright, this hand's not exciting, but I think it's still a keep. We've got some Brontodons, which can both block and maybe destroy an enchantment. And then Carnage Tyrants. Well, our hand just got a bit better with the Initiate on turn 2. Unclaimed Territory on Vampire. And Dusk Legion Zealots. Let's run out the Initiates. So next turn we could play Brontodon and activate. And there's Legion Lieutenant. Take 2. Opponent should probably have used the Unclaimed Territory there to maybe represent something like a Fatal Push with their Concealed Courtyard. Alright, Jadelight Ranger. I think we play the untap land to have the Brontodon available just in case, since I don't foresee this Foul Orchard coming into play tapped being a major problem. And if the opponent plays something like a Thopter Arrest once again, at least we can still use a Brontodon. I guess it doesn't do a whole lot since we would still lose a Brontodon, but at least we get rid of a permanent for maybe Ascent purposes if the opponent has Radiant Destiny. Another Unclaimed Territory. And there's a Radiant Destiny. Still have decent blocks with the Brontodon, so we might not see an attack this turn. And I imagine if the opponent had Call to the Feast, they would have played that first. So here we can just play another Brontodon and play the Foul Orchard, still have the Initiate for a Brontodon activation, so that seems fine. And then next turn we could even play the Carnage Tyrant if we want to. Another Unclaimed Territory. And a Martyr of Dusk, that's fine. No attacks. So end of turn we could blow up this Radiant Destiny with one of our Brontodons, which I don't really mind doing, since next turn I think we're tapping out with our Carnage Tyrant, so we won't have the mana to sacrifice one of our Brontodons. Freebooter is also appealing here, so we might actually want to play the Freebooter first, just to check. And yep, there's the Profane Procession, so we can snipe that. Opponent's left with Ifnir Deadlands and Plains, so I guess the Deadlands can get rid of the Freebooter, but our opponent just concedes, even though they did have the Ifnir Deadlands to kill the Kitesail Freebooter, but then we still had the Thrashing Brontodon to deal with the Procession, and at some point we were going to play our Carnage Tyrant, which would have been able to hold off all those vampires until we find our Journey to Eternity to take over the game. Alright, I want to thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this gameplay, and as always, have a nice day. I also want to thank all my patrons for supporting the channel, and you can do so yourself as well over at patreon.com/LegenVD, where you get cool rewards for supporting the channel, as well as getting us closer to our goals, where with every goal reached, we will release an additional weekly series. So if you want to see more content, Patreon is the place to go.